thank you all for joining this session. I'm truly honored because I know that there are also good presentations happening at the same time, but don't worry that everything is going to be recorded. So let me talk about automation. It's not just coding. My name is, just give me a moment, please. This didn't start in the proper way. So I am Diego. I am an open source and Selenium enthusiast. I do like testing a lot. And the combination of these two things led me to be a Selenium committer, where basically I ended up also as part of the technical team, who is driving the direction of the project in this sense. Currently, I am working at Sauce Labs as a senior software engineer, part of the open source team. And if you want to follow me in one of those platforms, those are my usernames. And before starting formally, every time I have the chance to speak publicly, I try to invite people to join the Selenium project. So please follow that link. We are a very open and accessible community. We are truly, truly open. So please join us and contribute to the project and help us grow more. What are we going to be covering in this talk? First of all, I'm going to go straight forward and tell you that I didn't know how to test before I started in those like Selenium community and so on. And that we all make mistakes, and I'm going to show you how I did a mistake and how I failed miserably, how I learned from those mistakes, and based on those learnings, I started to plan to succeed. And in the end, we're going to have some words about if coding is important or not. So let's get started. First, let me give you some context about myself. First, I went to university many years ago when computer science was actually not a cool thing to do. So this ended up with me having a job at a newspaper back home in Colombia, where I was coding 8 hours a day with Visual Basic 6.0. So there was no knowledge of automated testing. We did some testing, but it was done by users. We were developing an internal application, and testing was done using spreadsheets, and users were following this. Then after some years, I moved to Sweden, where I did a master's in computer science, but already it was cool to do computer science. So this made me feel much better. And when I was done, I moved to Germany. And I found a job as an automation engineer. So in a field that I have never covered before, but I knew how to code, so I thought I had everything covered. One of my first tasks was to actually do API testing. And what they told me was like, test all the things, every single endpoint, every single use case. And that's what I started doing. I wrote a bunch of new tests, and it went pretty well. Soon after, the lead of my team said, thank you for all your contributions. Maybe you can help us now with UI testing. So I just followed the same pattern for every single use case we had in the application. I basically wrote a new Selenium test using WebDriver, and the consequence from that effort was that I ended up with a lot of tests. So all the test suites ended up being slower now because I had more tests to run. And my first thought was that maybe the infrastructure was not powerful enough. So I asked for like some time to work in it. I got into Selenium Grid, so that's how I ended up doing some open source projects and joining the Selenium project. But sadly, after having a really good internal infrastructure, the first thought we had was to add now more tests because the test suites were running again at in a short time. So after doing that cycle a few times, that adding more tests, things getting slow, improving infrastructure, and so on, we found that actually we were spending more time maintaining the infrastructure than actually doing what we were supposed to do, which was testing. So I thought maybe I should actually learn how to test before doing all this testing. And as a consequence of this process, I am now here today talking at SauceCon. Learning how to test. was an interesting phase for me. And there are tons of resources on how to learn testing out there, but most of them are focused on automation. And I was interested more in the concept of testing. So I ended up with these two, which is my recommendation. There are plenty of more things outside there, but I read this blog post 2016, so it's like nothing new. So Google did a blog post about how to start figuring out your test process and your test plan. So this is like a helpful document that you can have a look. And also I read the book from Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin that explains the different aspects of testing, how you can approach, how you can work with testing, and so forth. So these are my two recommendations, but there are many more. After this process of, okay, I know how to code, I now understand how to test, then in late 2018, I got into the list of people who you should follow in test automation. So Joe Colantonio builds a list every year, and I got into the list for 2019. So I was there next to great names. Some of them were working in Sauce Labs, and they are still working in Sauce Labs. So I thought it was a perfect timing because around that time, November 2018, I started to negotiate my process of joining Sauce Labs. So this was like the perfect timing. I ended up joining Sauce Labs. So I thought that was it. I did it. I am like in the top of the automation culture. That's it. I don't have anything else to achieve for now. So I joined Sauce Labs, and shortly after joining, I really wanted to start contributing to my team, right? I wanted to show off what my skills were, my testing skills. So I was able to, again, do development, and I found a ticket in the backlog that I could work on. So there was a ticket where Safari 11 or 12 were not able to be working properly when doing live testing, and the bug was this one. And I have seen this before, and it's basically when you start a browser through an automated session, so like starting a Selenium WebDriver test, and you have Safari popping up, and if you want to click on the browser, Apple changed the way the security works. So if you want to click on the browser, basically it will show a pop-up saying, this is an automated session. You cannot interact with it. If you want to, please stop the session or continue the session. And this was confusing for manual testers who were using our product in Sauce Labs because the message was confusing. So I knew what we could do. I spent a while trying to fix how we were starting the Safari browser, changing the code around there. And what I ended up doing was to fix the bug. So we were having 2-week sprints in our team, and on Fridays we were doing the demos. So I spent around 2 hours recording videos. On the left side, I had a video showing the bug, and on the right side, I had a video showing the bug fixed. And I spent like 2 hours recording them, putting them together so you could see them at the same time. So in the end, I wanted to show off. That's why I'm here. These are my skills. I know how to test. I am really good. And when I did the demo, people were super happy. And I even got comments like, wow, it feels as you have been here working for a long time, like you're already contributing so much. So I felt, yeah, that's what I wanted. I did it. So my ego was like in the clouds. That was a Friday. I went for beers, super happy. And then came back on Monday, and there was a new ticket in the backlog that was saying Safari can connect to any website when using Sauce Connect for some customers. And that was specifically the piece of code I had touched during the last week. You can imagine the feeling there. All my pride was gone. What did I miss? How can this happen to me? I am in the list of people to follow in automation. This is a complete failure. My morale was completely on the floor. But in the end, the thing is that we all make mistakes, right? And this is just a part of life. But what is more important is to understand that failing or making mistakes is not entirely a bad thing. Because every failure is giving us an opportunity to learn something from it, right? And it would be actually a real failure if we don't get something out of it. So a failure, like, let's just say that it's something that is giving us a chance to improve something, or in us or in the process that we're following, right? And I think in general, this statement can be applied to any context in life. So how to learn from a failure, right? There are tons of resources out there for this, like even complete books that teaches you how to grow as a person and so on. But in our context, I like to use a common technique called the 5 whys. And when you check what the 5 whys are, like Wikipedia tells you that this is the cause and effect relationships underlying a particular problem. But what does this mean? This basically means that you ask yourself why until you understand what the root cause is. This is why they use it in technical incidents, like when you have incidents in a platform, to build up postmortems and to figure out actions that will be taken to avoid future incidents. In general, the idea is to find out what the root cause is. So let's apply it to this case. The statement was that live tests with Safari cannot connect to any website when using Source Connect. So I started thinking about why did this happen? And basically, the virtual machine that was running the Safari browser was not using Source Connect for live sessions with Safari. And why was this happening? Because there was a change in the code on how Safari is launched for live sessions, right? And why did this happen? Like, why did this change broke things? Because the tests we have for live sessions were running without Source Connect. And why are we doing that? Because the code path that drives the logic to test Source Connect and live sessions was covered before with the automated tests part. So this means that I changed it, like the way the code was driven, right? But in the end, I forgot about the main reason. I didn't spend time understanding how the flow of the system was. So without this, I couldn't really figure out how to test properly. And to give you a bit of more detail of what went wrong, let me show you here. So in Sauce Labs, when customers want to run a test using Source Connect, so Source Connect is basically a VPN that is established between the customer's network here on the left and the Sauce Labs cloud. So there is a client, Source Connect, and there is a tunnel VM here on the right. And this communication is happening in a secure way. Why are we doing this? Because when the customer starts a Selenium test, then the request comes here to our cloud. We start a virtual machine. We want to load a website that is inside the customer's network. So we go through this tunnel, right? And we load the site under test. The change I did in the code basically forgot about this part, omitted that part completely. So when a customer wanted to actually run a test and load a website internally, well, what was the result? That the Source Connect client was not being enabled for that. And then I knew exactly, after understanding how the system works, I knew how actually to fix that bug. But the first step, as you can realize already, before even writing the test, was understanding how the system works. So the simple plan was write a test that fails, fix the bug, and then run the test again. Some people also call this TDD, but there is like a whole different area to have this conversation that we can do it in Slack afterwards. So how does this test look like? Basically, you can just take a piece of paper and write down all the steps that you need to successfully test what you need to test. And in my case, I needed to start a local website in my own network. I needed to launch Source Connect. I needed to go to live testing in our platform, then enter the local website URL in the live testing section. We had to select the Source Connect tunnel, start a live session, and then we were able to check that the local website loads. The important thing is that many people don't realize that the first test is always manual. Even if it's an API, you can do like request with Postman or with curl. Same thing with websites. So manual testing is always present, even in a small portion. So we don't need to write a single line of code to actually test something. How does this look like the manual test? So I start a local server with Python. Then I build a small website with a red background. And then when I click on it, there are black dots. And this is to help me visualize that I am actually able to reach the website inside the virtual machine. I start Source Connect. Then I go now to Source Labs. I'm going to go to localhost 8080. I select the Source Connect tunnel. I select the Safari browser, which was having the bug. I start a session. And then I can see that I am able to load and reach the website because I can click on it and I can get some black dots. So this took perhaps 30 seconds, even less. This is a manual test, right? And I was able to make the bug fix, do this test, and do a release quickly because some big customer was like suffering from this bug. And what I did afterwards was to go to the process of thinking if I needed to automate this test or not. And there is a famous comic that is telling us that in theory, when we're working on manual tasks, if we write some code, the automation will take over and we will have so much free time, right? But in reality, we start writing the code, we have to debug why things are not working, then maybe our approach is not working, then we have to rethink, and then we just keep developing this eternal automation task, and we don't have any more time for the original task. So from my point of view, I like to ask myself 3 questions. And if any of them is true, this is a clear indicator that the test should be automated. The first one is, how bad is if this feature breaks? Are we going to get fired? Are we going to lose a lot of income? Are we going to look back? Are we going to look bad in social media? Like, what's the risk of this? The second one is this feature heavily used? Like, 80% of our users go through this path every single day or every time they use our application. If this is the case, we should actually automate a test that is helping us cover that feature. And is the code changing constantly? If this is also happening, maybe we should automate that code path as well. And how does this look? We need to automate this test. We need a few things. The first one is we need the website, right? That's what we were having before. We need to somehow start Source Connect. And we need an automated WebDriver test. We use WebDriver.io in our team. And the reason to use WebDriver is because we need to simulate real user interactions, not just like send JavaScript commands to click on buttons, which is what most of the new competitor tools do. But basically, from the beginning, when you start writing these tests, the main idea that we need to have in our heads is that all these tests should be executed anywhere, like in any place, in any laptop, in any CI pipeline, and by anyone in the team. So that's the main concept that we should have in our head. And the easiest way to think if our test is going to be implemented in a simple way is to think straight away, if someone joins your team tomorrow, how long do they need to run this test? Let's say if it's more than 15 minutes, it's already a bad experience. It's a bad developer experience. So a way to achieve this, I guess there are many more, but the way and the approach we like to take in our team is to put everything in containers. It's making them more portable, and there is no dependency hell at all. So how does this look? What I'm going to do next, I'm going to show a video how these tests that were automated work in our environment and using Source Labs, of course. And it will be like a pretty quick demo. But at the end of the presentation, you will see the name of the Slack channel where you can join me. And if you want to, I am happy to jump into a Zoom call with anyone and show you step by step how the tests work. So this is the test. we have wrapped everything in npm commands, and we're using WebDriver.io. So here, we're building the containers for the tests, for Source Connect, and for the website. So we're running them in different browser combinations and in different flavors of the versions of the browsers. And then we just go to Sauce Labs. We see how all the tests are starting right away. And to show you something, some tests that I was already running, I could click on this successful build, and I could see how the test was running, and it was simulating a real user. So we can see how Sauce Labs was being loaded, how the user or the simulated user was entering the user and the password, and in the end was doing all the process that a manual tester would do in any single session that they're running in Sauce Labs. So they like selecting the browser, afterwards entering the URL for the local host, selecting the Safari browser, selecting the Source Connect tunnel, and so on. And in the end, the experience is that we're simulating what a manual user does while using Source Connect. And in the end, we're going to see that we're able to click on the website, get the black dots, and through WebDriver, we're going to be able to get the color of the pixel. And if the pixel is black, we see that, okay, the test is working, Source Connect is enabled, and our users are going to be happy. We run these tests every hour against our production environment, and this has been super helpful to detect any possible incident. So to start wrapping up slowly, how important is coding? So there is no doubt that coding is important, but it is way more important to solve the problem before writing the first line of code. And this tweet, maybe it's not as popular, doesn't have a lot of likes, but it's one of my favorites. And basically it's telling us that everything else is needed to understand the situation. So everything else that you need to understand the situation, so the context, the people, the documentation, and then solve the problem, those are the things that are way more important before writing the first line of code. So the message that I'm trying to send you here is that it's okay to fail and make mistakes. This is part of life. But to failing to understand why we're making mistakes, to avoid the learning process, is not really a good thing. We should try to learn why we're failing and improving after each failure. So even if the failures make you feel bad and perhaps ashamed, which was my case, and also caused me to get a call in the middle of the night from our head of engineering back then, it makes you feel really bad. But in your head, we should all feel like we need to keep going and we need to face the challenges, always caring about the middle and the long-term maintainability. And why is that? Because when we reach a goal, things don't end there. We will have a new task, a new goal, a new project, and we need to keep working and maintaining what we're doing, especially for us and our future us, but also for the ones who will join the team and who will work in our code in the future. So the main point here is that we should enjoy the experience of trying, learning, failing, and succeeding. Because in the end, and I am stealing words and thoughts of my colleague Eli Flores, like we should think about having a good developer experience. And please also remember that the journey is as important as the goal. And with that, I would like to thank you. If you want to ask a lot of things, will be in this Slack channel, but I tried to go quickly through the slides so we have at least 5 minutes of questions. Thank you very much for joining, and I'm going to switch to this window. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to start addressing any questions. So there is one question that says, what was the trickiest complex thing in Selenium UI automation you have ever faced, and how did you come up with a solution? I think this has been the most tricky one, and it was not my own solution, like it was a team effort, because it's quite complicated to figure out if the live session, the manual testing session, has started successfully. And why is that? Because the user can start a manual session, but to actually figure out if you can touch or you can interact with the browser that is remote is not straightforward, because you are using a VNC connection. And that's why we were thinking how to make that happen. And that's why we came out with this red screen that when you touch that screen, it turns black. And in Selenium WebDriver, you can actually say, okay, give me the color of this pixel. And if it was red still, then this means that I cannot reach the browser. Okay, so the next question is, could you please tell us a few tips about setting and managing test data, and maybe some lessons learned from failures related to it? The normal failures here are that when I started my automation career, we were using a lot of hard-coded data. So we were creating customers in the database and products to test different things. And this was not a good experience, because when we tried to run tests in parallel, of course, we only had a limited amount of products and users. So we couldn't go higher than 10 threads in parallel and so on. So the best tip I could give, if you want to think about managing data, is that hopefully we have an API to create that data before the test is executed. If not, then maybe an approach to have data that can be used before the test, like in a ephemeral way. So sort to say, to create it through a backend process, like maybe doing inserts to a database, or doing maybe some tricks with the development environment. That could be a way, but in the end, the best way would be to have an API that helps you to create the data. A question from the chat. I've been a manual tester for 4 years. What is your advice to shift to automation? I think the easiest way to switch to automation is to choose a programming language that is easy. Could be something like Python or Ruby, because they are scripted languages and they're easy to understand. And the first thing is to start small. Like, don't think about automating 10 different cases. Just pick one, the most simple one, try to automate it, and run it like over days, and find a way that it becomes reliable. I think that's basically start in small steps and slowly. Another question. How do you trim the fat and get management on board with getting rid of useless tests? It's a complicated question, and I'm happy that I'm in a company that testing is important. So this is not really a matter for me right now. But before, it's not that they didn't like that we deleted tests or like we got rid of useless tests. Is that we never got time to do that. So we had to fight and show somehow in the first times, like do it in our own time and show how the build was getting faster. And afterwards, we were able to get some allocated time to do those tasks. Thank you. One more question is, how do you work with data that comes from third parties? Is a mocking a good solution for end-to-end test? Yeah, absolutely. I would say that that's the way to go. When you have third parties that you cannot actually avoid, the easiest way is to mock the data or to build an API that can actually simulate what the third party will give you back. So yeah, mocking as much as possible for end-to-end tests. So the last question is WebDriver a good framework to pick? Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's well maintained. No, I'm just kidding. It's a really good framework. Christian Broman is a good person who's maintaining it, and he's actually asking the question. So always making fun of me. Question from the chat. What do you think about RPA tools as UiPath versus Selenium? I honestly think that all tools have their own environment. So if the tool you're choosing right now makes sense for you and is not giving you any limitations or lockdown, it's not locking you down to you only use this tool in the future, I'm okay with that. I prefer to use tools that are completely open source and not biased by any company. So WebDriver is a standard and is powered by the Selenium project, which is not ruled by any company, not any interest. It's completely free and open source and open community, but different from the other tools that are out there in the market that there is a big company behind them. So I think if it makes sense for your environment, I'm okay with that, but I try to push more for WebDriver. So I am 2 minutes over the time, so I think we should wrap it up, right, Susie? Or anyway, I shared with you the Slack channel, which is called Test Automation is Not Just Coding, and then we can continue the conversation there. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I didn't expect to have so many people with all the other good talks. I hope you liked it, and see you later in the other talks. Bye.